Frank Nuessle, an affiliated faculty, organizational dynamics and managing partner of Global Performance Institute, a consulting firm specializing in helping organizations to accelerate performance through the use of systems thinking and idealized design. Mr. Nuessle has had a 30-year career in cable television, publishing, and corporate consulting. His primary interest relates to the issues of global sustainability and large system change. With expertise in sales, marketing, and strategic planning, he has worked in recent years with HP, Unisys, Fujitsu, Computer Systems, Harris Corporation, and Siemens Medical to assist leadership to generate greater productivity from existing resources and to accelerate revenue growth. He holds an economics degree from Princeton University, an MBA from the University of Rochester, and has studied organization design in the Organizational Dynamics program at Penn. Welcome, Frank Nuessle.
Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, that's Nestle, by the way, like the chocolate. So, but thank you for that introduction. I've kind of dumbed down my slides a little bit visually because of this situation where we don't really have very good light here. But I could not resist this particular slide because I thought it sort of was a symbol for what it is that I want to cover today. Money through the lens of the living system sciences. So for the next 30 minutes, we will be looking at money and money systems through this lens with sciences such as evolutionary biology, systems and design theory, environmental science, sociology, psychology, and a little economics thrown in. And let me also say that I'm not a scientist. I think of myself as a researcher. My purpose is to get you to think a little bit differently about money. And even though Steve Jobs didn't care much about proper English, we will be returning to him later. But I also want to get you to be thinking differently about man's role on the planet. There's an urgency to the work being done here at this conference and by all of you, and the urgency is to expand the American imagination beyond the fiat money monoculture. Today we will be exploring three aspects of money. Money is a mystery. I would submit that we really don't understand money. Otherwise, why would we have a money system that produces results that nobody wants? And yes, there are some very rich people, but in the long run, I would submit that the current system is not going to serve them either. We'll also look at money as flow in a living system. There's some very important lessons to learn about money as flow or throughput in our economic system. John Fullerton touched on this a little bit yesterday. And then we'll look at money as the evolutionary trim tab. Here we'll touch on theories that point to a tremendous opportunity to rethink money and to potentially reboot the American economic engine. But first, two stories. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got here, or my version of what the evolutionary biologist David Sloan Wilson calls the pinball machine of life. And then we'll do a reality check. We've already had a bit of a reality check, but I'm going to give you a look at our wicked problem in three numbers. My story begins in the summer of 1971 as I was finishing up an MBA at the University of Rochester. I'd written my thesis on cable television and was about to start a job in that young industry, which at the time nobody had heard of. Then in August of 1971, President Richard Nixon closed the gold window and this foreboding depression hit me. It was like a subterranean fear that I did not understand and yet I felt I had to act upon. because I became convinced that the only sensible course of action for me was to buy a farm and become totally self-sufficient. Because I knew nothing about farming and because I'm still a klutz with machinery, I did not take that action, but I did buy some bags of silver and stored them in my brother's basement, much to his derision. I got over my fear, went on to work in cable television, publishing, and corporate consulting before starting at the University of Pennsylvania in 2002, where I began studying and more recently teaching the application of systems thinking to the issues of planetary sustainability. My particular interest remains money systems, but I've never forgotten that almost primordial fear that arose in me resulting from Nixon's change in our national money system. That began my journey to better understand money systems. The second story relates to our wicked problem in 3 numbers. Now, a wicked problem is a term from complexity theory. Wicked problems are a class of social system problems that are ill-defined and unique. They are not just complex, but they're deeply ambiguous. And our wicked problem in 3 numbers. The first number is 1.5. Which is the ecological bubble. So a bubble is anything that cannot be sustained. So if you think about a balloon, you blow up a balloon and you blow, 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 and then all of a sudden it bursts. And that's the sort of bubble that we're looking at here with the ecological bubble. 1.5 represents the number of planetary resources that humans are now consuming that are not being regenerated. In other words, if we continue to live how we're now living, just to maintain existing living standards for the top 1 billion people on the planet, and that's basically everybody in this room and most of the people that all of us know, we will really need 1.5 planets. And that does not account for the billions of people in China and India and the rest of the world who want to live like we live. Now, this could be described as man versus the planet. And one thing we all know is that in the long run, the planet is going to win. Now, the second number is 2.5, and this is the inequity bubble. And this represents the number of people, 2.5 billion people on the planet out of 7 billion, who could starve any day and that are living on just a few dollars a day. While at the same time, a small, almost minuscule percentage of the population, the 1%, are accumulating wealth at an ever-increasing rate. You can think of this as the man versus man bubble, and I think of it as social Darwinism writ large. And the third number is 3, and this is the burnout bubble, and to me, this is the most disturbing. According to the World Health Organization, in 2005, 3 times as many people on the planet committed suicide than those who died from wars and other violence. Now, this is very disturbing because it points to an increasing, pervasive hopelessness. Just last week, there was an article in the New York Times about the increasing rate of suicide in Europe. And you can think of this as man versus himself. More and more people are believing that life is meaningless and are acting accordingly. Now, these 3 numbers, these 3 bubbles paint a picture of separation, of lack of connection, and I would submit of operating from a mental worldview based on scarcity. We heard a little bit about that this morning. Yet I would also submit that all of these numbers, these bubbles, are a direct and inevitable result of the same systemic problem, namely how we create and distribute money. And Tom Greco talked about that also this morning. Now, could it be that the fiat money bubble is the root of these other bubbles? Right now, there's $191 trillion in speculative money that's just floating around the planet, a number that is 3 times the global GDP. This points to a complete disconnect between the financial economy and the real economy. So why are we producing results that nobody wants? As Jared Diamond has written about extensively, we are headed for an Easter Island scenario unless we change our societal direction. Now, I would submit that these problems are systemic. They're caused because we see ourselves and our society as separate from nature, isolated from each other, and not as nested living systems. Only by evolving our worldview and rethinking money can we emerge from these wicked problems. Now, all research begins with a thesis or a point of view. I believe that we need a parallel system for the creation of money that operates alongside and supports the national currency. This parallel network would consist of smaller, localized, specific purpose, social and public credit clearing exchanges, all part of a cloud-based value exchange network that is decentralized and digitized. By rethinking money, how it is created and distributed, I believe that we can reboot the American economic operating system. But to actualize this vision, we first need to better understand money. So let's dive into these three views. Money as a mystery, money as flow, money as the evolutionary trim tab. All mysteries begin with questions. So why is it that people don't want to think about money, much less talk about it? If money is the most important, the most magical invention of man with the power to allocate resources and coordinate human behavior, why do we know so little about it? No one set out to create the three bubbles mentioned earlier, yet those bubbles are a direct and inevitable result of our current economic system. Why do you think that all of our economists and other priests of prosperity worship at the altar of economic growth? I would submit that it is because of the design of our current interest-based money system, which must grow, and as Tom Greco mentioned this morning, is growing exponentially. And anything that grows exponentially has to reach that bubble point where it collapses. And, you know, Tom, I thought did a good job, covering that, and I'm not going to get too much more into that detail. But so how do you solve a mystery? Well, it's elementary, my dear Watson. You just start with the right question. And here's the question that I'm grappling with. Why don't we have a science of money? Now, Tom Greco and I have talked about this, and he's a firm believer that we know everything we need to know about money. And my response to that is, then why aren't we acting on it? Because basically, we need to actually create the system and have it functioning before it is literally a science of money. What kind of a crazy idea is this, a science of money? Most people think there's only one type of money because one type is all they've ever known. Certainly, if we wish to live more ecologically, it would make sense to adopt monetary systems that make it easier for us to do so. Exploring these really wicked problems is about seeing the world not as it is, but as it could be. And there's considerable evidence that all the tools needed to create a network of place-based currencies are already available. So let me switch now and ask another question. And you'll notice that I really have more questions than answers, but I'm kind of bringing this conversation to you from a little bit of a different angle than you've heard so far in these two days of very, very interesting conversations. So how do we advance knowledge? Roger Martin, Dean of the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto, argues that all knowledge moves down the knowledge funnel. Knowledge moves through three stages, from mystery to heuristic and lastly to algorithm. All mysteries start with a question. Then after much intuitive thought, experimentation, and frustration, that mystery becomes a heuristic, a rule of thumb that narrows the size and scope of the mystery and makes it more manageable. Then after more research and experimentation, knowledge moves to become an algorithm, which reduces the heuristic to a repeatable process. Now, there are many, many examples of this. Think of gravity. What did they know about gravity 500 years ago? Very little, even 400 years ago. Gravity today is an algorithm, which really is what allows us to take put a man on the moon or a rocket or, satellites, all of the rest of that. And it applies to electricity, it applies to computers. All of these things move down this knowledge funnel. So money right now operates as an algorithm. All of the quants, all of this money that's circulating all around the world is all, computer control, which is basically all about an algorithm. The heuristic is rule of thumb. This is the world of experts. So this is where your banker sits. But I would submit that we need to basically know more about money and how money can serve us as a community and serve the planet, and we need to act on that. So much of the mystery of money lies in the emotional, visceral, fear-based centers of our brains that equate money with status, with success, even with survival. Those survival doubts were the emotions that I was experiencing as a young man in 1971. Our current fiat money system is based on principles of scarcity, and we've heard a bit about that already. And I believe that fiat money basically stimulates our selfish self, our selfish nature. Now, do you all know any of these people? So here's the huckster and the voracious consumer. Could it be that greed and fear are being continuously created and amplified as a direct result of our system for the creation and distribution of money? We can produce more than enough food to feed everybody, and there's definitely enough work for everybody in the world, so why is there never enough money? The scarcity is in our national currency, not in our human nature. Our casino economy is not supporting long-term health. There's a growing body of scientific knowledge that refutes the selfish concept and that proves that humans are inherently helpful and community-oriented, particularly if given the right social context. Harvard's Steven Pinker, in his exhaustive study, The Better Angels of Our Nature, is one of many experts who believes that human nature is not dog eat dog. So how do we change our social Darwinist mindset? This is our challenge. This is the challenge to really make the kind of change to the butterfly economy that Tom Greco talked about this morning. So what's the desired characteristics of a redesigned money system? Let's consider money as flow in a living system. What is a living system and what makes for a sustainable living system? We've talked about money and about the need to change our worldview. Part of the change in worldview is to recognize that we humans are evolving according to the same pattern as all other living systems. Well, that's great. So why is it that we don't live by this? It does seem obvious, yet certainly a species that was living by this basic dictum would not be destroying the planet. I don't have time to go into all the characteristics of living systems, but suffice it to say that accepting a living systems worldview is the key to a redesigned economic operating system. Of these four living systems that you see here, one is very different. And I don't know whether you can see that, but we have a person's body here. There's a beehive. This is a forest. And this is some people sitting around a table in an organization. So a human living system or an organization, for example, is the only living system whose parts are purposeful systems. So that includes everybody here and everybody, all humans. We're purposeful. That means that we have free will for good or bad. So why is it, and this is why it is so hard to make societal change. You must appeal with meaning and not facts. Change is incredibly difficult for all of us, for everyone. Most people are calcified in their worldview. You must capture people's imagination to entice them to do something different. I'm sure that everyone in this room has experienced the difficulty of trying to get your neighbor or your colleague to believe the new money systems are needed. Those blank stares get tiresome, don't they? And here's another fact about living systems. Whoops, there we go. The more open and free-flowing the connections between the parts of any system, the more resilient, adaptive, and creative the living systems will be. We must also understand that our economic and financial systems are governed by the same fundamental laws that govern all ecosystems. This is a fact that is not yet acknowledged by mainstream economists and certainly not by high-level policymakers. Both ecosystems and financial systems are complex flow systems that require resilience to balance efficiency. Viewing economies as flow systems ties directly into money's primary function, which is as a medium of exchange. In this view, money is to the real economy what biomass is to an ecosystem. It's an essential vehicle for allocating resources and generally allowing the exchange system to work as a synergistic whole. So here's a picture of the balance required between resilience on one side and efficiency on the other. And you'll notice on this graph that it tends to move, you need more resilience than you need efficiency. If it's too efficient, it's brittle and and subject to collapse. If there's too little efficiency and there's too much resilience, then it tends towards stagnation. And the criterion around resilience is about diversity and interconnectivity. An environmental scientist by the name of Bob Ulanowicz at the University of Maryland, he's retired now and lives down in Florida, but he did all this seminal work, and it's quite complicated, but he has boiled this down to a formula. So there is a formula, and so a balanced ecosystem, any flow system, would be needs to operate in here. This is the window of viability, and it's really, I think, very important work. The sustainability of any complex flow system can be thought of as an emergent property of structural diversity and interconnectivity. It requires a balance then between efficiency and resilience. The message here from the research is that a monoculture of national currencies, which is managed on the basis of market efficiency, supposed market efficiency, then it will generate its own structural instability, and we're doomed then, really, I think myself personally, to have another crash. And so it really is time to get ready for that. So I also had another graph that I wanted to show you, but I took it out because of this situation, and I blew that up so that you could really see it. The key conclusion is that nature does not select for maximum efficiency, but for a balance between the two opposing poles of efficiency and resilience, because both are indispensable for long-term sustainability and health. The healthiest flow systems are those that are closest to an optimal balance between these two opposing poles. So let's look at money as the evolutionary trim tab. What makes an economic operating system function, and what role does money play? The evolutionary philosopher Daniel Dennett calls evolution a general purpose algorithm for creating design without a designer. Evolution discovers designs through a process of trial and error. As Dennett puts it, evolution is a search algorithm that finds needles of good design in haystacks of possibility. So what does this have to do with money? If money can be thought of as flow or throughput in an economic system like biomass through a biological system, then does that make an economy an evolutionary system? This is the theory of the new field of complexity economics. In this new field, capitalist economies are best understood as dynamic systems that support emergent behaviors with selection operating to drive evolution. Evolution is an algorithm, it is an all-purpose formula for innovation. So how do we capture this more powerful economic engine? By recognizing and designing a money system based on the principles of economic evolution, and realizing that economic evolution is not a single process, but rather the result of three interlinked processes. The first is physical technologies. This is what you usually think of when you think of technology. These are things such as bronze making, steam engines, microchips, just about anything you can think. The cameras that we're operating here, just about anything you can think. This is the physical technology. Then it is also interlinked with social technologies, which are ways of organizing people to do things. The two co-evolve with each other, yet the co-evolution of physical and social technologies is only 2/3 of the picture. Technologies alone are nothing more than ideas and designs. In order for technologies to have an impact on the world, someone or some group of people needs to turn the physical and social technologies from concepts into reality. In the economic realm, that role is played by business and increasingly by non-governmental organizations or NGOs. These organizations use physical and social technologies together and express them in the environment in the form of products and services. Innovation seldom comes from government. In fact, government is usually an inhibitor to innovation and a guardian of the status quo. We must acknowledge that the capitalist economic operating system as practiced in the United States is the most complex, creative, living system ever seen on the planet. Yet, does it make sense that the crucial element that allows the operating system to function, namely money, is controlled for the benefit of the few? There's a systemic bias in money flow, and it's against sustainable development. What happens when we combine the new theories of evolutionary biology with the theories of complexity economics? We can begin to develop design criterion for a more fully functioning system for the creation and distribution of money that serves the whole. So what are the ingredients to reboot the economic operating system? And I believe that most of these ingredients already exist. So on the physical technology side, we have advanced software, we have mobile payment, cloud networks. The developer of Twitter has developed this thing called Square, which you put on your little PDA and you can automatically take payments. So there's all sorts of physical technologies that are coming to the fore. On the social technology side, this whole social media thing, the massive interconnectivity. There's a wonderful new way of organizing people called holacracy, which is starting to take hold. It's not taking hold here in the United States so much, but it's doing quite well in Europe because we're still stuck here in so many ways. I'm sure you guys have heard about collaborative consumption. So there's lots of social technology stuff that's happening. On the business design side, here is the challenge. Because basically, you have to have a system that supports itself. And complexity economics has proven this, that basically, just like in nature, just like you as a body, as a living system, you have to have food to stay alive. Well, it's the same for a business. And the way you measure that is your profit. So this is the challenge, how to design the system as a whole. And I believe this is where we're crying for more research. So what is needed for our money system to contribute to sustainable living? And I've talked about this, but it's real simple. And Tom mentioned it earlier. We need more resilience to balance the efficiency of the current monoculture national currency. And I believe this is diversity of place-based credit clearing exchanges. They're local, they're locally owned, they're locally operated at the state, at the local, and then special interest credit clearing exchanges. And this is, building a lot on Tom as a mentor. Tom Greco is a mentor of mine. So he and I have talked about this quite a lot. And then massive interconnectivity. We need to actually have a network. And Tom and I have talked about all the network theory and how you really need to reach scale. So all the elements needed to create are, they're all in existence. The challenge is how to structure. How do you bring all this together, and how do you reach scale? And that's some of the issues that need to be dealt with. We're at a very critical juncture in American history. So here's a picture of that history in 30 seconds. The first 100 years were about exploring and conquering the continent. The next 100 years were the industrial consumer economy. Now that game is played out in the United States. And unfortunately, all of our existing institutions are trying to extend the life of this dead animal. And then this is my version of Tom's convivial. I think we need a regenerative economy in a caring society. And Tom, certainly I agree, and I both agree that we begin by reclaiming the credit commons. So what do we do now? So this is, at this point, this is really just all a lot of information. I say that we need to ignite that should be an R, our evolutionary search engine. So everybody in this room is a radical. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You're interested, you do believe that something different has to happen. So we need to innovate, fail, innovate, fail, innovate. That's basically evolution. And so we really need to ignite our evolutionary search engine. And we need to entice the American imagination. We have got to figure out a way to move beyond the fiat money monoculture. So I have to turn to Steve Jobs, and I believe that we need to understand what he meant when he said this: our task is to read things that are not yet on the page. That's how I see our solving the wicked problems. And yes, this is a different approach than getting your state legislator to approve a public bank, and I'm not suggesting that that is not also a valid approach. But I do think we need to have a better understanding of money and then design a system with dynamic tension to localize the creation and distribution of money. Do I know how to do that? No, I don't. But that is what will provide the resilience that is now so sorely needed in our financial system. Like Steve says, our task is to read the words that are not yet on the page. And by so doing, we can really ignite the citizens to live in a more sustainable fashion. One of my heroes, Bucky Fuller, said once, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And I think that's our challenge. We need a new model for the creation and distribution of money based on our new scientific understanding of the world and not based on the belief in social Darwinism or a fear of it. That is where the public discourse is now stuck and is getting us nowhere. What is our field of dreams for the new American financial system? How do we build it so they will come? How do you capture the American imagination? These are the questions we have to answer. And where else are they going to get answered? In this room. This room is filled with radicals. Solutions to wicked problems always come from the fringe, never from the center. I'm convinced that together with others, we here in this room can solve these wicked problems. So I say to you all, let's do it. Thank you.
Frank, and we have time for just a few questions, so who'd like to start here? Okay.
So given all of this, wanting to think things in a new way and do things in a new way, what do you think about the Occupy movement and what they're doing?
Well, I'm very excited about it. I got to Zuccotti Park before they closed it up this past fall, and the energy there was palpable. I don't at all agree with the usual trite thing. Well, they don't have an agenda and all of that. I guess myself personally, I don't see a political solution to this problem. I really believe that we we have to innovate, and we have to put something out there that's going to work, and that calls for a lot of experimentation. So, to answer your question, I'm not that in touch with the Occupy movement to know what's going on now, but but I think this is going to be a very interesting summer, particularly with these two political conventions.
Hi there, Jerome Sloat from New York, Servicebackedmoney.com. I believe that the money system we are looking for already exists in the form of bridge tolls, forever stamps, money that is service-backed and service-denominated. It already exists with public authority. I think it needs to proliferate elsewhere in the economy since it is so easily divisible. And there is a profit motive in there because more of that money can be issued than needs to be reclaimed since it is all worth the same. There is no quantity issue with forever stamps. They do not lose value when you create more of them. They are usury free, they are inflation resistant. Since you have made the call for people with ideas, I just wanted to step up here and say thanks.
And I totally agree with you. And as Tom has shared, there are thousands of experiments going on all around the world. Maybe not so many here in the United States, but I think we do have a representative here from, from Good Finance up there in Massachusetts.
I'm in Good Finance.
Oh, thank you, yes. I've been following the Transition Town movement. There's a lot of time banks that are starting up, and so there's a lot of stuff happening. That's for sure. I guess what I believe is that it all needs to be kind of networked together somehow, and how to do it I don't know, but I think this is the seminal issue of this whole movement, and that is how to really get it up and operating, establish the principles. Tom has done a lot of yeoman's work on all of that, and he's got some ways to do it. So we basically just have to figure out how to do it, how to bring the physical technologies, the social technologies, the business design technologies together, and then reach scale, because scale is what we really need, and that is operating, at least in a region. We have to get something going really heavily, I think, in a region. Go ahead. Do you have other questions?
One right over here.
Hi. I'm working actually with an Occupy group in New York City trying to reimagine a bank. We're trying to build a bank, and we're looking at a number of different models that could function. But I applaud your open-mindedness about the different avenues that the Occupy movement is taking. So I wanted to ask you, just in terms of resilience, what do you think? I really like the credit clearing exchanges model, but what do you think about the cooperative movement, cooperative industrial firms, cooperative manufacturing, cooperative banks, as an example of an institution that would exhibit resilience, because they engage with the capitalist system, they do competitive price determination, profit, reinvestment, but they do have a kind of flexibility about how they operate. What do you think about that in terms of the resilience end?
Well, I think everything needs to be tried. It gets back to the evolutionary search engine. The more and more stuff we try exactly like that, and like a lot of the suggestions and things that have been talked about, the more the merrier, because that's how we're going to find out what works. So I think those are wonderful things to do.
Frank, I know there's a lot more questions, but that's all we have time for so that we can keep everything on schedule.